Hi guys, it's Mike Fielding here again. This is my second video, but some of you may not have caught my first one, so I just wanted to give a little bit of a summary of where we're at this point. So basically, at this moment, I'm laying in a vehicle being driven towards a decompression chamber. I'm on oxygen, so I've got the oxygen mask on. I've got lots of people around me that are very, very concerned because I've basically come out of the water from a scuba dive, had searing pain, and then found it very difficult to walk and actually had to be carried. So I'm realizing how serious this is. The people around me are realizing how serious, and we're on our way to the decompression chamber to see the doctor, which luckily is 20 minutes away from the dive shop. And I say luckily, the situation I found myself in was that I've got decompression sickness, or suspected decompression sickness, at this point, and you know that's quite a rare thing. I think that it's only 1 in 10,000 dives that people get decompression sickness, and that's just the mild form of it. To get a severe form of decompression sickness is even more unlucky, and especially when there hasn't been any extenuating circumstances like a fast descent or panic descent, or you've gone really off of the charts with your and not followed your computer, so you've gone way beyond safety limits. But anyway, so you know that's unlucky, but you know things balance out. I'm on my way to the chamber, which happened to be 20-25 minutes away from the dive shop, and it was the only chamber in East Africa. We were in Zanzibar, okay, and it's the only chamber in East Africa. So if that chamber hadn't been there, I would have had to be medevaced to South Africa, and it would have been a completely different thing. Anyway, so we're on the way to the chamber. I'm breathing the oxygen. Now, bear in mind, before I was really tense and spasmed and, you know, really quite distressed, really, like probably suffering from a bit of shock, finding it hard to accept the reality I was in. But the oxygen was really calming me down. I could feel my body relaxing, and I actually started to feel really much better. So when we actually got to the chamber, okay, they were like, well, how do you feel? And I said, I actually feel a lot better. And they were like, well, can you walk? Bear in mind, 20 minutes before I couldn't walk. I was like, I think so. And so I actually got up and I actually walked into the building where the chamber was to meet the doctor. And the doctor was like, oh, you know, he was surprised because obviously he'd been told that I couldn't walk, and you know was expecting this person in front of him to be a lot worse than I was, and you know, so I was surprised. He was surprised, and he was like, "Well, you know, what's your balance like?" And I was walking one foot in front of the other, and I was a little bit wobbly. And I said, "Look, it's not perfect, but I'm not too bad." I was doing some calf raises, going, "I feel good," and he was like, "Well, okay, look, at this point, it would look like that maybe you need to have a run in the chamber today, and then maybe tomorrow, and maybe the next day as well. But we were thinking maybe 2 to 3 runs in the chamber just to get rid of the nitrogen in my system, and that may be enough." And so you know, I was thinking, okay, I'm not quite sure why this has happened. It's super frustrating that it's happened, and you know, but I mean, I've had a bad scare, like really thinking it was serious. But right now, I was feeling like, oh, this I can deal with this. It's not as bad as we first thought. However, the doctor said to me, look, have you actually been to the bathroom? Have you passed water since the incident? And I was like, oh, actually no. Let me try. And so I went off to the bathroom to try to go. And that's when I realized I actually was finding it really difficult to go. I had kind of just felt like I wanted to go, but just couldn't go. And I was there for quite a while, and I came out, and the doctor was like, look, I really think we need to start treatment, because what can happen is when you've had a spinal decompression incident where the bubble has been lodged on your spinal cord, the oxygen can disperse that a little bit so you can feel better. But your body then starts to react to the fact that there was a nitrogen bubble on the cord. It's neural sensitive tissue, so it starts to inflame and bruise, and you get worse before you're going to get better. And I said, oh, actually, yeah, I am starting to feel a little bit worse again. Absolutely, let's go in, let's get into the chamber. And so the idea was we were scheduled for 8 hours inside the decompression chamber, which is not for the claustrophobic. It's quite a cozy tube. And I went in there and had an assistant. It was Tammy that day that was volunteering. Big shout out to Tammy. She had volunteered through the entire time I was in the chamber, which in the end ended up to be 10 days. And yeah, big shout out to her that she was volunteering and gave up her time, and I really, really appreciate it. So she was inside the chamber with me that day, and the idea was that the doctor said, look, we're going to start the run, but you need to make sure you're drinking water and make sure you do try to go to the bathroom. We need to see you to go to the bathroom. Now, I didn't realise the implications or the serious implications or fully realise them at that moment. But anyway, the chamber treatment started and we were about an hour and a half into it, and I still hadn't gone. I was trying to go. I was kneeling and trying to go inside the chamber in the jug that they had given me, but I couldn't go, and I was starting to get a little bit more distressed about that because I was really starting to get uncomfortable because the bladder gets fuller and fuller and it starts to hurt. And I basically conveyed that to the doctor, and he said, oh, unfortunately, I think you've got urinary retention, which is a result of spinal shock, and it's not allowing your bladder muscle, or the muscle of the bladder to relax. It's just not letting it relax. So we're going to need to stop the treatment. We're going to ascend you slowly over half an hour, and we're going to need to take you to hospital so that you can get a catheter inserted. And so, you know, you can imagine my feeling at this point was, you know, look, this is going downhill fast. Like, I realised it was serious, had the oxygen, felt really good, thought, you know, it's not quite as bad as I'd first thought. And now this, you know, now I'm going to have to be going to hospital. And he was like, you'll need to spend the night there, and then we'll need to start the treatment in the morning. And I'm like, okay. So then they've brought me up. They send the chamber over half an hour. As I'm trying to get out of the chamber, I'm realizing just how much pain I'm in with the bladder. It's so full and so uncomfortable that it was affecting my ability to move. And so I was feeling that I couldn't move anywhere near as well as when I went into the chamber. At this point, I could still just about walk, but I thought that the decline in my mobility was because I was in pain with the bladder. So they were having to assist me a little bit to get to the car, and then we had to drive an hour and a quarter to the hospital. Now, all that time, you know, I'm really just dealing with being in, you know, a lot of discomfort, but you just have to send your mind somewhere else and just try not to focus on that. Just try to think about something else, and just don't focus on the pain, because it's not really going to help. You just try to distract yourself a little bit as best as you can. So I was doing that, you know, chatting to Lindsay, my fiance, and so on, and just trying to keep busy. We got to the hospital, and I remember thinking they brought a wheelchair up, and I was like, oh, I won't need that, I'm not too bad. But I went to stand and I couldn't. So I was like, I had to admit that I had to go into the wheelchair. But again, I still thought it was to do with the bladder being so uncomfortable, because I knew that the doctor had said, look, you're probably going to get worse before you get better, because there's going to be this inflammatory reaction around your spine. Look, I'm a physiotherapist, so, you know, look, I understand, you know, inflammation and you know, the neural tissue and so on. And so I understood this, but I never suspected it was going to get as bad as things got, because once we then got into the hospital, and bear in mind, this is a hospital in Zanzibar, so it's not quite the same as going to a hospital in Australia, where I live now, or England, where I grew up. So we got admitted into the emergency department, and, you know, everything's a little bit slower, a little bit, you know, harder with the language barrier and so on. But the doctor, Dr. Henrik, who's absolutely fantastic, and I just need to give a shout out to him as being unbelievable. Like, from the start to the finish, looked after me, went over and above what he had to do. Totally professional, very knowledgeable, really nice guy, and just a big shout out to Dr. Henrik at this point. Anyway, so he was there, and he was basically saying, look, I don't want to step on any toes, but, you know, I'd like to insert the catheter, but I think I'm going to have to let the nurses do it. And, you know, that was fine. We thought that was fine, but they were struggling to get this catheter in. Now, bear in mind, I'm in agony by this point. I'm really starting to feel it. And so, you know, I'd never had a catheter put in before. And some people would have asked me, well, what was it like? All all I remember was just focusing on the fact I need relief right now. And so I did not even feel the catheter going in. They were struggling a little bit. It was bleeding a little bit. They were struggling, but they did eventually get the catheter in. And, you know, look, it gave me that relief that I was looking for. However, I was slowly realizing that even though I'd got this relief from my bladder, I was realizing how my mobility wasn't just going downhill a little bit, it was falling off a cliff. I was realizing that I was laying there in bed and I couldn't move my feet, I couldn't move my legs, I couldn't roll over in bed because I noticed that my core had just switched off. I just had a pot belly, like all my abdominal tone had gone. If I tried to sit up in bed, I had to use my hands. I was like wobbling around because I had no core, so I just couldn't sit. So, you know, as I said, I'm a physio, and I was realizing, look, this is really serious. This is like full on. You know, I could feel my feet. You know, when Lindsay was touching my feet or people were touching my legs, I could feel, but it was so impaired. Like there was no sense of, when they tested for hot, cold, I had no sense of that. I had no pinprick sensation, but I could just feel people touching, like a dull feeling that they were touching. So that was nice to cling to that I can still feel my legs. The other thing was that my rational brain was trying to go, okay, look, you walked into the chamber after the incident. So, you know, you had a bubble on your spine, but there was no severing, like you didn't have an accident that caused a lesion or a cut to your spinal cord. So there's no reason why this shouldn't pass. But it is very difficult for you to stay in that place and not to go to the place of what if, because effectively I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, if I was describing this to anyone, that word I would use is paralyzed. I am paralyzed right now. And when you realize that, that's a very scary thought. And you know, and it was hard to be positive in that moment because, you know, as I said, I had Lindsay, my fiance, there, and we just got engaged on this trip, which was a real high, of course. And we were discussing that, you know, we'd met dancing, doing a style called kizomba, and we were talking about how we could do a kizomba dance for our first dance on our wedding. And I was like, no, you know, this can't be, because I won't be able to dance. And then you're like, well, not only will I not be able to dance, will I be in a wheelchair for the wedding? And like, your head just goes off on these places where, you know, but and I won't be able to do, we were planning to go to a festival, and I loved it last year. I had a really, really, you know, life-changing experience with the energy and the warmth that was there, and I wanted her to go, and all of these different things come to your head that you know, make you sad. I won't be able to do this, I won't be able to do that. But I kept trying to bring it around and come back to a positive place. And, you know, it was really positive for me to be thinking that the things that I was thinking about were our shared future, you know, that I wanted to get better to have this future with Lindsay. And so that made me feel good that I was feeling this bond and closeness to her, that I wanted this future with her so much. So that was a positive, but you can imagine it is very hard to stay in that positive place when you're dealing with that. But the thing that I also just kept coming back to was that I know myself, and I know I'm very determined, and I kept thinking, I had the thought, Kill Bill. What was it? In bed, wiggle that big toe, and just get that signal going through. And again, this is where my physio understanding, if the signal starts to come through, you can build on that. Then you can start to get a little bit of movement, a little bit of flickering in the muscles becomes a bit of contraction, and you can build on that. And once you've got a bit of strength, you can then start to stand and build up a little bit more strength, and so on. And I had this whole thought process. Okay, this is the reality, and how am I going to deal with this? You know, I could understand that I was going to have to spend a lot of time in the chamber. I knew that it was going to be, days and days and days in the chamber. But I'm like, okay, if that's what it's going to take, I've got to get on with it. And so, you know, the one thing I want to say to people is that I kept thinking, this is just one moment in time. Right? This is a low, dark moment in time, but it won't be so bad on the next moment, later on, today, tomorrow, the day after that. You know, so the one thing I want to come back to is people that are really having a tough time, try and tell yourself that it's just a moment in time. It's just now that I feel this way. I might not feel like this later. Tomorrow might be better. The next day might be better. There's other moments in time. This is just one, and just center on that. Try and focus on that. And so look, there's a lot of, you know, visualization techniques and a lot of meditation techniques that I'd like to talk through with you that I was using. Not that first night, I really was just getting through things a little bit that night, but that I then went on to use moving forward the next day and so on. But I will come back to those and talk about those in the next video. So for now, I just like to sign off and just leave you with that idea of that, just that focusing on breaking out of that idea that this is everything the way you feel at this moment, putting it to the point that that's just one moment, and that there's better time, that there can be better times ahead. Okay, see you on the next video.